So good afternoon, folks, and welcome to today's webinar on selection and practical use of head protection in the construction industry. I'm Alanna Klein, Quality Assurance Director for Risk Control with CNA Insurance, and this is the second webinar in a two-part series being presented by the NIOSH NORA Construction Sector Council's Struck By Work Group. I have the pleasure of co-chairing the work group with Brad Sant, who you heard from if you joined the first webinar on October 15th. I'm happy to be here today to host this webinar alongside CPWR's Jessica Bunting, who is available for support in the chat. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's panelists. Brian Rizzo is a new Director of the Office of Construction Services in the Directorate of Construction at OSHA. And he will be telling us more about OSHA's effort to protect their own staff, as well as educating the industry on best practices related to head protection. We will then hear from three different contractor representatives who have incorporated head protection into their overall Struck By programs and will speak to their practical application of head protection, as discussed in our first webinar. Andrew Valentine is an area safety director with Gilbane Building Company. Paul Ziegler is the vice president of safety with Allan Myers, and O'Brien Mills is the vice president of safety with Aldridge Electric. Kenneth Seal, apprenticeship training representative with the International Finishing Trades Institute, also joins us to share the labor perspective on the transition from traditional hard hats to safety helmets and raise concerns about the limitations surrounding the manufacturing and testing of headgear. Following the information shared by our panelists, we will have significant time for Q&A and discussion. So again, please type in your questions in the Q&A box at any time. CPWR's Executive Director, Cain, will moderate that portion of the webinar for us. Thank you for being here today. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Brian to share more about what's happening with head protection at OSHA.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me get my screen shared here. I apologize, there may be a little bit of a lag. All right. All right, so it looks like the screen is shared now. And I'm Brian Rizzo. I'm the director for the Office of Construction Services at OSHA in the Directorate of Construction, and I'm happy to be here with you all today to talk about OSHA's transition to safety helmets and our safety helmet program. And we started this a few years ago, and the data, we started out by looking at some of the data to see just what direction we wanted to go, where the issues were. And at the time in 2020, when the conversations began, we started to recognize, and it was very clear that falls and traumatic brain injuries and injuries to the head were causing some very serious challenges for us. And we wanted to make sure that as we were moving forward and setting the example, that as this technology came forward, we were doing the right thing. And OSHA itself sets the baseline standard for industry, but we were recognizing that the industry was moving ahead and there may be an opportunity here for us to move in the same direction. So with the data that we see here on the left side, so in 2020, the average claim, or 19 and 20, the average claim was around $94,000 per year. And then the data to the right in the chart was updated from this slide. And we see that the following year, it was around the same, and that's the most recent that we have there. And outside of the cost of claims, we were able to look specifically at severe injury reports that we were receiving in the BLS data, and what it was telling us that over 5,000 severe injuries to the head had been reported, and 57% of those were related to falls, and that included falling to a lower level and included falls to the same level. And this was also increased by other types of struck by incidents. So as the conversation started and we started to see this in the industry moving forward, we decided to run a pilot to see if this was the right move for us to protect our folks. And some of the pilot goals were to evaluate the staff experiences with the safety helmets and see how they felt, about the hard hats that had been in place for so long, and be able to compare that information. We also wanted to ensure that the head protection that we were considering moving forward with would be compatible with other technology. And we also had to make sure that, safety as a core value is something that the agency promotes. And we believe that every worker has the right to the safe and healthful workplace, and an employer has the responsibility to create safety and health management systems. And in the same line, as an employer, we reviewed our safety and health management system manual to make sure that what we were providing our workers was appropriate. We also had a couple of purchase considerations that included the Buy America Act requirements. Again, the OSHA Field Safety and Health Management System manual for how we conduct our job hazard analysis and what the baseline requirements should be for every CSHO in the field. And a few other considerations to include the availability of inventory for the type of helmet that we chose, and recommendations from other OSHA users, what that experience was. So like I mentioned, this started a few years back. So around the fall of 2022, our Dallas region, former Region 6, initiated a pilot and wrote a plan. And around the same time, the Directorate of Construction and the National Office recognized that many of our field offices were interested in the concept, and we worked together with the region to expand that pilot so that there were multiple regions and multiple national offices involved in the pilot study. And to kind of start, we selected 4 safety helmet brands and ordered them. And then in November of 2022, we baselined our study participants for the hard hats that they were currently using to get some information about what their experiences were, and then issued out the pilot hard hats in December of 2022. And we took a sample from, again, across the agency, different offices, the field staff, and ran through sort of 2 iterations with the different types of helmets that we were testing. And the users wore them for about 30 days in each iteration. And all of the information that we pulled back was pulled into analysis that ultimately resulted in the agency moving to safety helmets in the fall of 23 when they were issued. And again, OSHA leadership was committed to that transition to superior head protection for our field staff. And it's really to promote safety and health as a core value. We see the industry moving this way. we have the requirement that's the minimum standard for head protection, and determined that the Type 2 Class G helmet was what OSHA as an employer was the right move for us through our job hazard analysis and gaining the feedback from the field during this initial pilot program. Following that, we wanted to make sure that information and seeing this transition and knowing that this was a best practice and something that we were doing to keep safety as a core value and improve our safety and health management system with best practices that provide the best protection for our employees. We published a safety and health information bulletin that would aid industry and employers in making that decision. So if you find this safety and health information bulletin, there's a lot of information in there about choosing PPE for head protection. There's instructions for properly inspecting and storing head protection and making the right decision for the industry, for the tasks, for the work that your employees are doing. And it's not a change to the standard. It's meant to help promote this technology as it's coming out and ultimately protect workers to the best way possible. So that's the short version of how we came into this, and I'll be passing it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Brian. Again, my name is Andrew Valentine. I'm an area safety director with Gilbane Building Company. And what I wanted to kind of talk through today regarding helmets was to just take a step back first and just kind of say, you know, when looking at the hierarchy of controls, PPE can be the last line of defense. But hopefully through what I present today and talk through, help you understand that helmets have made a massive difference for us and for our trade partners here at Gilbane. So kind of want to talk through how we got there, the implementation, and then just give a little testimonial about you know, the journey we've been on and the outcome of that journey to move from the standard hard hat to a helmet. It's important that the actions we choose, you know, not only affect us, but our trade partners around the globe. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jessica. So where did it start for Gilbane Building Company? In 2016, we took a hard look and started kicking around the idea of going beyond just using a standard hard hat. That was late in 2016, early 2017. We started to put helmets out, different styles, and get some feedback from our field staff, being superintendents, project engineers, as to what they thought on helmets. And then pretty quickly, as we progressed through 17 towards 2018, we got pretty intentional and said, okay, I think it makes really good sense with the data that we have that we go from the standard hard hat to the helmet. So that year, a helmet was issued to every employee, a Gilbane Building Company employee. And then we got pretty intentional too with the rollout of that. You know, anytime you make a change regarding something that's that instrumental, it can be hard, even for our folks, right? They're very proud of the stickers that are on their hard hats. It shows the projects that they've built. You know, it's handing somebody something new can create some ripples, right? We took it a step further, and in specific business units, we had our business unit leaders or executives do handwritten letters to our employees to talk about the why behind the change. When you see the data based around head injuries and traumatic brain injuries, it's remarkable, right? So we want to protect our biggest asset, which is people. So we said 2018, we're all in. An email came out from our CEO, COO at the time, saying, hey, look, we're moving forward. We're going with helmets. At the time, we chose CASC, and we went all in on helmets. You know, but what's good for us is good for our trade partners too. 2022 is when we went full helmets for everybody, including our trade partners, on every job we have globally, which is a pretty big change. But the adaptation went well. So I know some questions came in early. I plan on addressing some of those. But when it comes to the rollout, or let's call it, there's no such thing as a roadblock, but some hurdles, some things we had to work through regarding different attachments for helmets, et cetera. We worked hand in hand with a few different manufacturers to work through those to make sure that our trade partners had the right helmet to use to safeguard them against whatever risks they're evaluating and trying to safeguard from. So if you can go to the next slide, Jessica. And on here, I threw this up. This is just specific to Gilbane Building Company. But in the top right corner, it talks about the requirements that for a helmet to be utilized on one of our sites, what we're looking for. And then you can see the long laundry list of helmets that currently meet that requirement. And if at any point a manufacturer produces a helmet that can get through the ANSI Z89 type 1 or 2, the ENL 12429 performance for not only front energy, but side, rear absorption, retention system, it can be added to this list. And that was one of the biggest questions I got from our trade partners when we started this was, what's the cost going to be and what is the benefit to us for using this, right? So kind of go back to what I said on my last slide, we really focused on the why behind it. At the time, there's not a federal standard to wear helmets compared to hard hats. But when we show the data and the impact it has from a traumatic brain injury, it's pretty telling. It makes really good sense to give our people the best safeguard possible so that there is an incident, it can absorb that failure. And I'm going to kind of roll right from that into my last slide, which is a testimonial. And I'm going to go a little bit of a different route. And I'm going to personally give the testimonial for helmets here. So in 2016, when this started at Gilbane, at the time I was working in our Washington, D.C. business unit, and we were one of the first business units to utilize helmets. And why this is so important to me, very, very early in my career, a project manager was walking down a sidewalk, which was icy, and slipped and fell wearing a standard helmet, or excuse me, hard hat, which came off his head, and he ended up striking the back of his head on that sidewalk. He ended up in the hospital for a couple of days as the safety manager responsible for that area was there, and at the time kept asking myself, like, what could I do? Granted, it wasn't on our job site. It walked off site. I kind of bring that 360 and say, since we've instituted helmets, we've had what we would consider life saves. We've had multiple life saves around the globe. But just here at home, where I hang my hat, my home base, which is in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, we've had 2 people fall while walking on a sidewalk outside of a job site, whether it be to get lunch or heading back to their car, wearing a helmet with a chin strap. And when they fell, the helmet stayed on their head. One of those individuals struck their head, but the helmet took the impact on the sidewalk, right? So we can't necessarily measure what could have been for that. What I can tell you is early in my career, being in the ICU with an employee who had a significant head injury, when that hard hat came off, to me, every time I see anybody wearing a helmet with a chin strap, I consider it a massive win. Right now, granted, it is a requirement for us on all of our job sites globally, that not only our employees, but our trade partners utilize these helmets. But it's personal to me, knowing that if somebody, a lot of people think, well, if I wear a helmet, I must be working at heights. These helmets protect a lot more than from just something being dropped from above or somebody falling in a personal fall arrest system deploying and that D-ring potentially kicking an old style hard hat off your head. The helmet stays on with the chin strap. But it can do you good too if you're just walking across the job site and there's a slip on the same level. That the presenter before me put a slide up which showed 20.5% of the accidents were slip, trips, and falls on the same level. So what I would ask anybody to do that's considering making this change to think about the fact it's not just applicable if you work at heights. These helmets are very useful in providing additional protection to your head when you're walking, right? And you could be on water, ice, whatever it might be. You could slip, trip, or fall. It's made a measurable difference for us at Gilbane. So with that, I will hand it over to Paul.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you sharing that. And I'm going to spend a majority of my time actually calling them testimonials, but real stories that have happened here at Allan Myers with some of our workers who, it absolutely saved their life. And a couple of the other folks have already said this. It's not just about working from heights. Our company went full helmets 2019. And, what I will tell you, if you haven't gone there, you need to. And when you do, the biggest hurdle is the why, right? So I think it's a little easier now, 5 years later, because it's quite honestly, I can't remember. It's weird now seeing a hard hat on a site where 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was weird to see a helmet on a site. We're 70% self-perform. which means 30% trade partners or subcontractors. We haven't required them. Quite honestly, we haven't had to. I haven't been on a site in the past 2 years where a subcontractor employee was wearing a hard hat. You know, it's just become sort of the norm. So back in 2019, we decided to do it because our CEO just wanted to have the best technology on our employees' heads. And he went to a meeting with some other CEOs, actually Gilbane, and was there with their helmet. And you know, our CEO was like, that we're doing this. So we started late in the year, and then by early 2020, we had helmets. We have about 2,500 employees, about 1,900, 2,000 of them are craft employees in the field, and they were all in helmets by the beginning of the second quarter of 2020. We did a crew by crew explanation as to why we're doing it, and then explained the helmets, all the attachments, and went through a process so that we personally had a touch with every employee that's going to put a helmet on their head. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to share my screen, is just share a couple stories. And as Andrew said, it's not just for people who work at heights. Okay. Matter of fact, none of our, you know, we do a lot of work at heights. None of our incidents that have involved the helmet yet have come from an employee who has fallen. And we've had 3 lives saved and multiple injuries greatly reduced because of the helmets. So let's see. Should be sharing my screen. Okay, so I'm going to actually in a minute ask Jessica, or less than a minute, ask Jessica to queue up a video. But I'll show you this. We had an employee, a superintendent, Jason, end of the shift. He's walking away from an excavator. Lane was closed. We had an open lane, the through lane. And you can see the POV with the red square. We had a triaxle leave the closed lane. You know, they were going at a slow pace, obviously, because they were just getting up to speed. This POV was going at a very high rate of speed, and basically cut in front of the excavator to avoid hitting the dump truck. And what he did was he hit Jason at 65 miles an hour. So I'll ask Jesse to queue up the video. I think I have to stop sharing, correct, Jessica?
Yeah, I can kick you off.
Yep, I got it.
I have to put the sound sharing on one more time.
On September 8th of 2020, we were doing some road work on Interstate 85, and a car came into our lane closure and ended up hitting me going like 70 miles an hour. And my shoulder went through the windshield, and my head snapped back and hit the top of the roof of the car that hit me. And truthfully, probably if I wasn't wearing that new hard hat, I wouldn't be here telling my story. Just because of the chin strap held the helmet to the top of my head when my neck snapped back. If I would have had the old hard hat on, the old hard hat probably would have flew off my head, and my head would have hit directly on top of that roof. So these new hard hats, you know, when they first came out, all the guys were giving us a little hard time, saying they were uncomfortable with the chin strap. But over time, you know, just like everything else, they got used to that chin strap, and I think the new hard hat is actually the thing that actually saved my life. So I'm glad that our company invested in them, and we're using them on a day-to-day basis. Thanks. I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, so And you can see here, so the excavator operator actually witnessed it and ran to Jason. Fortunately, we had EMS not too far away, and you can see right here what the EMS folks said. I mean, basically that helmet staying on his head saved his life. I'll just share two more quick ones with you so I stay within my time, but we had another gentleman, Jerry Foreman, basically walking across a live lane of traffic. Should not have been doing that, but human beings make mistakes, and he made a mistake. Got hit by a car. We estimate going around 30, 35 miles an hour, which you think, oh, it's 35 miles an hour. Go look at a car going 35 miles an hour. It's fast. And, you know, Jerry went up, hit the windshield. His head hit the windshield. His head hit the ground. Jerry didn't walk away, but he walked away that night after he got through the hospital. And again, you know, we contribute the helmet, and I have all three helmets, not time to show them, but you can see that the scrapes and the dings on the helmets where they made contact. And the last one I'll share with you is Stevenson. So you can see here this form, Stevenson was below this pier and bent over, picking up some items. This piece of plywood was not attached properly, just the timing of everything, it came loose. And the edge of this form actually hit Stevenson in the back of the helmet as he was bent over, knocked him to the ground. Stevenson never lost consciousness. We took him to the hospital in the ambulance because that's what you do when somebody gets hit in the head. And he was released that evening. Other than a headache and a sore neck, he had, no other injuries. So again, just in an effort of time, I can't get into like all the stories that we have here at Allan Myers, but what I can tell you is it doesn't matter what type of work you're doing. It doesn't matter where you are. You should be wearing a helmet on a job site. As Andrew was saying earlier, people slip and they hit their head, and concussions are like serious forever stuff. So we've found it to be extremely successful, and 5 years later, nobody even talks about the helmets anymore. It's just like a normal thing. So appreciate everybody's time, and I'm going to hand it over to O'Brien.
Thanks, Paul. So I'm O'Brien Mills. I'm the Vice President of Safety here at Aldridge Electric, and we're an electrical contractor, a national electrical contractor, and we operate in the power and the transportation spaces. So I'm going to leave this quote up there as you read it, give you a little story about our inception of helmets. So funny story. So we're, our adoption of the helmets begins as I was doing research. I did research for about 6 months on helmets because we were having a rash of same level falls, and nothing serious, but on each one of these instances, the hard hat came off. So I was looking for a better product, and was turned to Turner and Clark's research, and presented that to our CEO. And at the time, it's kind of like when your partner says something, your partner says something, your partner says something, and then your best friend says the same thing, and it just clicks. That's the inception of helmets for us. So our CEO went to this meeting of these other partners in the industry, and he came back from that meeting and said, we're going to these helmets. And it was just a huge aha moment for me. It was really great to know that, this helmet really fit our culture. It really fit our values, and really showed our employees that, we want the best PPE on their heads. So go to the next slide, Jessica, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our subcontractor integration and how we worked with our trade partners and in the industry to get them into helmets. So a lot of that was the demonstrating of the value of safety. So that was the why, why we're doing this. And we showed them and discussed with them it wasn't just do it. We wanted to show them and bring them into our culture and explain the why. And we did that through open and honest communication and education. There's a myriad of education out there on helmets that we receive from the industry, and we were showing them how this piece of PPE stays on your head and protects you. So they were really open to that communication, and then of course leading by example. So you go to our job site, everybody is zipped up, strapped up, and looks really good and professional. And then holding them accountable on the consistency. So we have our subcontractors in, we expect a integrated chin strap and a Class E helmet. The rest is on them. They can go investigate on price and procurement and all that. But we just, on our job sites, we just operate with those two parameters. So the next slide, I'm going to address some of the resistance we had to the helmets upon inception in 2018 when we went to helmets. The two areas was on our line side, and then the FR, because we do work with electricity. We expect these pieces of PPE to be FR and tested. And on the line side, our linemen expressed their doubts, and to the point where they were posting videos on the internet saying that they had their doubts on real world type activities. The other one was the FR strap. So the strap being made of acrylic, we asked the manufacturer if that was FR. It was not at the time. And we had a customer insist that any outside chin strap being used on a helmet or a hard hat is to be FR. So in both instances, I went back to the manufacturer with these two challenges, and within 6 months, I had a working prototype. So they really responded to these two situations, to the point now where they list their the finished product on their catalog of helmets. So the helmet, the interior is FR and resists melting, and then the strap is made of FR too. So big response from the manufacturer. So I'm going to set up this video. I'm going to show, it's about a minute long. Sorry, Jessica. I'll set it up first. So this is Gary. This is one of our employees. Gary and one of our other employees were involved in a very serious event, and both of them walked away, and I'll let Gary explain the rest.
Basically, it was a coworker and myself. We were moving some parts from a drill rig that we switched over from one mode to another. There were some accessories and stuff that needed to be stored away. Ultimately, they ended up sliding off the tip of the forks and striking us both. Him more severely. This is his hard hat here that shows the crack where the manifold hit him. I was struck by the hoses. He got the brunt of it, and this was the result. He actually had to get his head stitched back closed. He had a severe cut. This has probably saved him as opposed to a regular hard hat, because this has the padding on the inside, the insulation, and the chin strap, which kept it fastened to his head. I believe it would have been a lot worse injury, possibly death, with the old hat.
So we gave that helmet back to the manufacturer, and we asked them to analyze it, and they said it was subjected to 3,000 PSI of pressure. That it was an 800-pound manifold that dropped off these forks onto the other employee. The other employee suffered 5 stitches, and Gary was hit by the hoses, and they both were able to jump out of the way, but the other employee did receive 5 stitches. But I think Gary explained it really well, that they would have been killed if they didn't have these helmets on that stayed on their head. And I'll finish with another testimonial. So this is from me. So we had 5 incidents since transitioning to the helmet, and these incidents mainly pertain to the head, either line of fire or slip and fall situations. And all 5 employees walked away from the events, received stitches to close a laceration. But in every single interview, these 5 interviews were done separately. In every single interview, they all said if they were wearing a regular hard hat, they'd be dead. So I think that statement says it all. Thanks, Jessica.
Great, thank you. And next we are gonna hear from Ken Seal before we get into the Q&A. Ken, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jessica. And first of all, I want to start out by saying that I do not question the fact if they're safer or not. I know that there's data coming out to show that they probably are, but it's the process that went about on the hard hats. And my fear is if we allow the process to go the way it is with the new ANSI standard being written up, then we can assure that it's going to happen with other safety gear. It's been mentioned on the call that, PPE is the last resort, which it is. It's been mentioned on the call that, with some stuff with the hard hats, they've called the manufacturers and had some improvements done. But I'm just going to address some of my concerns. I've said it in a lot of meetings with the International Safety Equipment Association, and I've asked the question, can I be a part of this new standards committee that's writing it up, this consensus standard, ANSI standard? I was told that I had to be a manufacturer. I asked them, so is the manufacturers the only ones voting on this? They said yes, that they're the only ones voting on this. They said they would send it out to have others look at it, mark it up, and send it back to them. And then their group would look at it and make that vote on the new ANSI standard. That really concerns me because that's not how I look at an ANSI consensus standard. But concerned about the current process for establishing ANSI standards for safety helmets, allowing manufacturers to write and approve these standards without input from other stakeholders can undermine the validity of the standard as a true consensus-based measure. It's not just about the safety helmet itself, but rather about ensuring the standards are developed in a transparent and inclusive way, which are not right now. With multiple manufacturers flooding the market with helmets, each bearing an ANSI certification, confusion arises. Then, when OSHA began wearing certain helmet brands, many in the industry mistakenly assumed these were mandatory. In reality, no standard process was in place to clarify this. A thorough, inclusive process is essential to prevent market confusion and to ensure the highest safety standards. Safety professionals are responsible for protecting the workforce, and it is crucial that all personnel protective equipment, PPE, especially helmets, go through a rigorous approval process. When we ask our team members to rely on PPE as their last line of defense, we need to be assured that this equipment has met the highest standard for protection and completion. So there is another question that I asked some folks that are on this standards committee writing the new ANSI standard. And I asked them a question. I said, is all your helmets going through a third party to get a declaration of conformity? Because every piece of safety has to have that as of 2019. I was told that everybody's using a third party. I asked them specifically, then can you put that in the standard? I was told directly, no, they're not going to put it in the standard. So what that does is that opens up the door for all these companies that use the mountaineering style helmet that's based off the EN 12492 to flood the market and use their own testing and put it in there and stamp that it's been approved. That's another major concern to me. Again, it's not about the helmet itself. It's not about is it safer or not. It's really about the process that went about on the safety helmets. The market was flooded. OSHA started wearing the helmet, and it created a lot of confusion prior to any research and prior to a proper ANSI consensus standard being developed to have a standard out so everybody was aware of all the issues that were and concerns that were out there. Jessica, that's all I had. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Ken. I appreciate your viewpoint. I know we've talked about it an awful lot. And for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Cain. I'm CPWR's Executive Director, and I just wanted to, before I jump into questions and answers, thank our panelists, all of you here today. But right now, I'm going to dive into some of the questions that we received during the registration process. And I've been trying to monitor the Q&A as well as the chat. But if y'all have questions for any of the panelists, you can go ahead and write them either in the Q&A. It might be a little easier to navigate, or the chat, and we'll do our best to get to the questions in the time we have. And my calendar says we have until 3:15 East. So just tell me if I'm off on that. Sounds like I'm not off. So the first question I wanted to pull up was one that was received during the registration process. And I'm going to point this one at Brian. And for the panelists, if you want to jump on your videos at this point, it might make it a little bit more engaging. So Brian, this question is for you. It says 29 CFR 1910-135 already references ANSI Z89.1 helmets. Are hard hats still acceptable, or is the industry switching to all helmets? Go ahead, Brian. You're on mute.
That lag is real over here. Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So the ANSI standard, the Z89 is referenced not just in the general industry, but in the construction and maritime standard as well. What we would expect an employer to do is to review the hazards of their work environment and to make that best selection for their employees.
All right, thank you. In this one, I'm going to throw at Andrew. In terms of percentage of workforce adoption, has helmet transition been more successful in any particular environment? And this questioner says, is there like a difference between union workforce, non-union workforce?
Yeah, so I get to work in markets where we're signatory and also open shop. So I address that question. For us, when we made the change, we went for all Gilbane employees. But when we went into the market, I didn't see any difference between union or non-union regarding adoption or utilization of the helmets. And again, I think Paul said it, a lot of the push for us was the why, why we want you to use this, what we perceive to be the benefit and the data behind it. But to answer the question regarding adoption, I saw no difference between our union or non-union markets. I mean, we obviously put it in the contract. Our trade partners priced it. It was a requirement to work on the job site. Now, again, we have the standards that we've outlined. They can choose which helmet works for them. But I saw no difference between union or non-union. Again, the largest complaint that I heard more than anything was just the fact that people were losing their stickers, right? Again, some folks don't put stickers on their helmets in the first place, but those are like badges of pride. So yeah, I saw no difference.
Great, thank you very much. And this one's tagged for O'Brien. Can you discuss the possible effects of rotational motion and how that relates to traumatic brain injury?
Yeah, some of the helmets on on the market these days address rotational specifically. There is a technology called MIPS, or multi-directional impact protection system, and that's been around for about 15, 20 years. Couple of the helmets do have that, and what that addresses is impact at a 45-degree angle. So there are a couple of manufacturers that use that impact system.
Great, thanks. I'm gonna jump over to chat and actually read the question because it is outside my area of expertise, so I will not try to paraphrase it. And I think this might be for O'Brien as well, but anyone can chime in. The question is, can someone speak to choosing between Class C and E, since most helmets do not include Class G option? What level of electrical exposure would create a need for a Class E? Is it primarily for electricians or also for those working near but not directly performing electrical work? I know that was 3 questions, but if you can respond to it, I'd really appreciate it.
So we're full Class E, even our subcontractors are Class C. So we work on and around electricity. So we go with the Class E. Even our line side has Class E helmets.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have a response for that series of 3 really challenging questions? All right. This is just a little question, and I believe it's O'Brien too. I'm sorry, 3 in a row. Somebody chimed in while you were talking and asked, shouldn't the helmets be AR versus FR?
We don't require that. We require fire rated. And these helmets, the certain manufacturer that we use has tested those in flash type environments, and we're very satisfied with that testing.
Okay, thank you. This one I'm going to throw over to you, Ken. The question is, how are trade unions dealing with the change? Are they providing additional training to their members?
Great question, Chris. Yes, we're providing additional training for our workers with the chin straps and all. The concern with our workers is they were all told that it was an OSHA standard that they had to wear all these helmets, which confused them, because every time I went in there, I said, who's having you wear these helmets? And they said, well, we've been told it's an OSHA policy. And that was the concern, that it wasn't an OSHA policy. It was actually either a general contractor or their employers having them do that.
So just as a commentary, what it sounds like is, while general contractors may be working with their trade partners as described by the generals on this call, it's not getting down to the worker or the understanding of what the change is and why the change is needed. And I think then it potentially further translates into which helmets are required. So it sounds like there might be more communication that has to happen across the board.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read this one because it's long. Dr. Trout says, please provide a brief overview of the current process for employers, contractors, and workers should use for selecting head protection in construction. For example, Nita, is there a need for a hazard analysis and knowledge of properties of head protection, like the properties types, type 1, type 2, hard hat versus helmets, leading to selection of the appropriate head protection? So how is the choice process made? I don't know if there's Paul, I haven't thrown anything at you. Have you had any reaction to that without putting you completely on the spot?
Well, no, it's all good. So, I mean, for us, it was the ANSI standard, and as it needed to meet. And then the last go around, so we picked a different helmet in 2019 because, quite honestly, than what we use now. There's very little choices on the market in 2019 for construction use. So a year ago, we decided that we were going to look for the quote unquote best helmet, right? So again, met the ANSI standards, and we picked out 12 different helmets that we from other folks had heard are good helmets, meaning they're comfortable, they provide the protection, which again, they meet the ANSI standards. It really became what is the most comfortable helmet for our folks to wear, and attachments. Like, you know, for the different types of work we want certain types of attachments, also sun protection. And a little bit was around some of our employees wanted the full brim as opposed to just a regular brim. Again, that was more of a sun protection because we work from Pennsylvania to Chesapeake, you know, Norfolk area down in Virginia. And we went through the 12 helmets. We picked 3 that we thought had the best options when it came to attachments and most comfortable. And then we went out into the field and we had different crews try all 3 helmets. And we had a list of criteria that we wanted them to answer, you know, questions about different things with the helmets. And we chose one that was far and above the best choice for our field. Again, met all the standards, but we wanted what the field thought would be the best helmet for them from a comfort standpoint. And that's how we did it. So hopefully that answered the question.
Great, thank you. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add to that? No.
Yeah, it's just the process, right? Because that's a mountaineering helmet that everybody's referring to. It's an EN 12492. It meets some of the ANSI standards, but a lot of them do not, and that's confusion out there. You might find some that meet all the criteria of the ANSI standard, but all of them has the ANSI stamp on the inside, which led to more confusion because those helmets were not based on an ANSI standard. They were based on an EN 12492 standard. So that should have been addressed, I think, at the beginning.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Ken? The fact that, or what I have heard is that the manufacturers may not test to the ANSI standard. Is that what you're talking about?
So the manufacturers might not test to the ANSI standards, and the EN 12492 is done by European. It's a European standard. And some of those manufacturers are not testing to the ANSI standard. In fact, and now they're trying to address that by making an ANSI standard for these new helmets. There's not even really an ANSI standard yet, unless ISEA has put it out yet. I don't think they have.
All right. Well, thanks. Paul, you talked about the accessories on the different types of helmets that you've tried. And this question kind of relates to it. It's not necessarily for you, but the question is, some trades, iron workers in particular, prefer to use a full brim hard hat. The question is, how is this being addressed? And I'd love to hear the perspectives of the panelists on this issue, and I have some other thoughts on it too. Go ahead, if whoever would like to speak on it.
Chris, this is Ken. That is a concern even for our workers, is they want that brim. They like that brim. It protects them from the sun and all that stuff. I know that there's some manufacturers out there that are testing attachments to make a full brim type helmet that slips over it. I know that there's some manufacturers that aren't testing the add-ons to those helmets. The helmet itself is tested, but the add-ons aren't tested. The one I'm talking to that has the full brim is not on the market yet, but that is being tested by a third party by that add-on that makes that particular safety helmet into a full brim helmet.
Thanks. O'Brien, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, we're responding to we have a program called Craft Voice and Safety, and they have voiced their concerns with these new, there's a lot of new full brim helmets coming out. So they've asked us to investigate that. So we're gonna look at those closely. One of the manufacturers we're looking at is Studson.
Thank you. I don't know if Andrew or Paul had anything to add. Did see this question came in, so I did call to a gentleman who works for the Iron Workers International Union, and they're very engaged in this issue. I'll kind of paraphrase what he said to me in a 15-second conversation, is that they're really interested in ensuring that their members have the best protection that's available to them, and they are working with manufacturers about the brim issue in particular. So I think this is definitely something that's evolving, and hopefully will all evolve in the right direction. So, you know, some of these things have some hiccups with them, so we'll get through them and overcome them.
One thing I'd like to add, Chris, on the
Yeah.
there are deficiencies on the specifically to the power industry, utility side of things, with these helmets. So I have been working with 3 different CEOs of manufacturers on that. It needs to be addressed very, very quickly. So the utility line, the power industry can adopt these.
Can you describe for me, who knows a lot less than you about this issue, what do you mean by deficiencies? Or what are some of the challenges that
So
you?
like full brim, a lineman prefers a full brim. So they'd like to see a full brim helmet if they're going to adopt it. The other thing, there's deficiencies on electrical safety with some of the full brims. So that's being addressed. I'm working with some of those CEOs to address that. But it needs to be addressed fairly quickly.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you kind of elaborating on it a little bit for my benefit. Bear with me for a moment. I don't know if any of the panelists would have a gauge on this, but the question is, what is the safest helmet / hard hat that falls under all the standards? Is there a way to opine on that one?
I mean, it's for me, it's an easy answer. It's the one that your employees are gonna wear. I mean, honestly, I mean, and I hear all the back and forth for, you know, for us non-technical people. I was a construction worker. I mean, I still am. I just don't wear boots anymore. But I was a laborer and a concrete, you know, finisher, you know, back in the late 80s and early 90s. And, you know, we can argue all we want about ANSI standards and who approved what, but at the end of the day, at least what I've seen in my own experiences, the helmet offers a heck of a lot more protection than a hard hat. Hard hats not only fall off your head, but they do not have the level of protection for any kind of impact. And to me, if you can find a helmet that meets the standards, whatever standards they are, and your employees are going to actually wear them when the safety person isn't around, and they slip and fall, or they have something fall on their head, or God forbid they have a vehicle hit them, I'm happy. That's the best helmet that I can buy.
Thanks. I think this question might follow onto that a little bit, and it's a little bit, well, I'll just not comment on it. I'll read it. Our type 2 hard hats with employer requirements for mandatory chin straps provide equivalent protection as a type 2 helmet. Does that make sense? I think it's, are there type 2 hard hats with employer requirements for chin straps? Is that equivalent to a type 2 helmet?
Yes, I mean, I can speak to that, Chris, based on the review of our expert panel, and we really stress that the helmet and hard hat are stylistic terms. And so I think the important thing in the question was that it specified both are type 2 level protection, and then both would have chin straps because the safety helmet style has a chin strap. And the question specified that the type 2 hard hat would have a chin strap. So I think those would be considered equivalent in protection at that point.
Thanks, Jessica. And I don't know if we gave background on the expert panel that you facilitate, but you did post the guidance document from the expert panel in the chat, and maybe you could just do it again at some point. Obviously, we'll send it out with a follow-up email to everyone present. But it kind of talks through some of these issues in a much better way than I can. So thanks, Jess. The innovation that we are seeing in the ANSI Type 2 safety helmets originally came from motorcycle and other extreme sports for head protection. Brian just mentioned MIPS. Are there some other new innovations that we may see coming out for construction head safety protection?
So I'll just jump in. Some of the attachments I've seen that some of the companies are working on are pretty promising. So including sun protection and lighting, especially.
Great. Thanks. And I'm looking, there's some more questions that are like accolades for doing this panel, positive words for generals putting this stuff in the contract language because it gets done, and thanking OSHA for its leadership. One question is, can't chin straps be added to a hard hat? And I think the answer is yes. And that was kind of the discussion or the question that we had before. Bear with me, this is real time. Some things are not questions. This is hopefully a simple one. What did Paul's company pick?
Well, we started with Cask and then we went to Stutson.
Oh, Stetson, you answered it in the chat, but now you've answered it for everyone.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
I am actually going to wrap up, Jess, unless you see another question. I'm seeing mostly comments come in.
Yeah, I think there were a couple questions again that are getting at kind of the differences in protection level and the differences between standards, and we really dug into that on the first webinar. So I would just recommend people, if you have not checked that out, go ahead and watch the first webinar as well.
Yeah, Jessica put that link in the chat, and everything is linked through CPWR.com. I'm going to ask another question. One actually came in. Thoughts on KASK, cask? Oh, I thought I would end with a zinger. I don't know, Paul, did you?
We don't use Cask anymore. We use Stutson. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
We use a hybrid of Cask and Stutson.
All right, great.
And
Thank you guys. Go ahead, Andrew.
We're also in a mix where we have some folks in some Milwaukee helmets and Cask helmets.
All right. Well, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up. I wanted to really thank all of the presenters, thank Alanna for the introduction, and of course, thank Jessica for hosting and organizing these webinars. We really appreciate it. This, as you know, there's a huge amount of interest and some good, healthy conflict around helmets, hard hats, and what is what. And we wanted to talk about that all today. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate you volunteering and helping us bring good information to the construction industry.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.